Good morning, and thanks for showing up. Once again, this third time in a row we've been boycotted by the media, but we expect that. Since Wednesday night, we sent out 3 press releases over and over to all the media in the Twin Cities. Because we have tribal members here, we sent out a special national press release that went all across the country, explaining that we have tribal members here that want the equal protection of the law, and that Leanne Regains is here asking for an Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the Indian people from the trust. We're very blessed to live in a country which is a republic, which has the greatest constitution of any other country in the world. Our Declaration of Independence and our 14th Amendment, equal protection of the law, can only be dreamed about in most of the countries in our world. Our founding fathers had a lot of debate when they built this Constitution. They had just come from oppression and exploitation, and they wanted to make sure that everybody in our country would be treated equally. The Declaration of Independence lays out the political philosophy of a new nation in the words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." There were a lot of people debating this Constitution and these documents. And the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness must be respected, period. That's one thing they agreed on, that when they got it done, it was correct and it had to be respected. There was people like John Stuart Mills and Thomas Jefferson. And Mills based rights on considerations of happiness to give them a foundation they would otherwise lack. All citizens deserved happiness. According to the Declaration, the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness must be respected, period. The second implication is that the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are natural rights. Thomas Hobbes and John Locke earlier distinguished natural from conventional rights. Natural rights are independent of government. They are inherent in us as human beings. They are, for that reason, unalienable. Conventional rights arise from agreements. Locke maintained that people have natural rights, including rights to life, liberty, and property. Those rights do not depend on government or any other person's acquiescence. They are intrinsic to being human. So if you live in the United States of America, you are supposed to have these rights. The Resource Party was formed after 30 years of going over to our state capitol and our capital in Washington, D.C. We started this journey by taking on the commercial fishing up at Lake of the Woods and Rainy Lake back in 1978 when the lakes were being harvested. We came over here to try to help save the resort community that was so important to the economies of that area. And as an outdoor person, like most Minnesotans are, we all enjoy the out of doors. We live and work hard during the week to go and relax on a lake or go hunting and just participate in the Creator's outdoor park. It's just a wonderful way of life, it's a quality way of life, and it leads to happiness. As the population grew and as the demand for more natural resources built up, the people that are in kind of control of the governments started creating clever schemes to benefit from the natural resources and undo the happiness resulting from what they were doing of the other citizens. And after spending 3 years over here in the early 1980s, I got very disenfranchised when I saw the people that were running this building right here, where we are. There were lobbyists here for the food industry. There were lobbyists for the tribes. There were lobbyists that one person that worked over here said he's the bag man for the food industry, you know. And that type of people, I was an honest businessman running a business that we didn't have access to power like that. And so I just didn't think it was right, so we stayed in it. And I was very fortunate to meet some people along the way that helped me. One of them was Ray Stosky over here, who owns this, who started the Hunting Angling Club with me. And after we stopped the netting of the white netters on Lake of the Woods and Rainy Lake, we started reading about a treaty rights battle over in Wisconsin. And because we'd been here at the Capitol for a few years, learning the players, we saw that there was a big connection between the tribal lobbyists and the food industry. And so we looked back and we said, gee, we just won a little battle, but here comes the war. So then in about 1985, I started studying federal Indian policy and connected with a group called Citizens Equal Rights Alliance, national umbrella group that works with tribal members. And that was the beginning of a long, long journey, learning about how our federal government, the American Indian movement, the tribal governments involved, the gambling industry, organized crime, all have gotten together to steal our republic from the people, and has led now to a platform for the Resource Party that we say is the only platform of all the parties in our country that will fix the mess that we are in. And so the last 4 years, I registered the party in 1997. I ran for U.S. Senate in 1998, and the powers that be, when I started spending money and inserting my papers in local newspapers, they started giving the Independent Party and another gentleman running for Senator Barkley full-page press on the debates, television every day, and they totally ignored the Resource Party. And that's the way it's been ever since. And I ran into a little financial trouble because I had a custom photo finishing business, and digital imaging wrecked my life in the early 2000s, so I had to take a few years off. But now since then, we tried to get on the ballot 4 years ago, but we couldn't get the 2,000 signatures. And 2 years ago, we tried and didn't get the 2,000 signatures. But thanks to Ray Stosky, the Hunting Angling Club, this time we were successful. There were other resorters up at Mille Lacs that helped. But people are really starting to see how sick the system is, and that we do need a platform to fix this. And our voice is finally being heard by enough people to get this going. I met Linda Eno 14 years ago or so when we started fighting the Mille Lacs Treaty lawsuit. We got that lawsuit into court. We stopped it. The Hunting Angling Club stopped it. And then we raised $2 million selling $2 and $5 raffle tickets to be heard at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court took the state's argument. The state had told me that we'll lose if we go to court, and they meant they would lose on purpose. And there's an Indian Claims Commission that ended all treaty right claims, land claims, water claims, any claim whatsoever against the federal government. Harry Truman signed the act in 1945 or something like that, and it ran till 1970s, paid all the tribes any claim that they had gotten cheated during the treaty era. And then Congress closed the books on all treaty claims forever. That is when they started AIM in the 60s in Minneapolis, and they got the PACs formed, and they started buying governors and attorney generals, and they started suing the states. And politicians, when they raised their arm to protect the Constitution of the United States and their fellow man, started selling them out with million-dollar campaign contributions, and it has just destroyed the level economic playing field and the pursuit of happiness that the rest of the taxpayers, except the people controlling the system, are supposed to have. And so we've been educating people, and now we're on the ballot. Now the next goal is to get 5% of the vote. When we get 5% of the vote by federal law, they have to allow the Resource Party to be a major party and put the issues that we bring to the table into the debate. It's a huge step for the country and the citizens, the taxpayers, the landowners of our once great republic. We have a constitution. The compass has been wrecked by all this special interest money. We've got to get back to the rule of law. We got to get that compass focused in the right direction again, back to the Constitution, the equal protection of the law, the Declaration of Independence. And we have a couple candidates running with myself here today that are going to tell you why they are in this battle. They're like me. They don't like it. They don't like the system the way it is. And then we also have a couple of great tribal member friends that we've met with our Citizens Equal Rights Alliance for 20 years. We've been working with tribal members. We want to tell you the AIM movement doesn't work. The federal Indian policy is a disaster. These poor people have just been held in bondage for so many years, and you're going to hear all about that from our speakers today. Very proud today to introduce the following people, and I'll start with Linda Eno, our candidate for governor. She'll tell you why she is a believer in the Resource Party platform. Linda?
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Linda Eno, the gubernatorial candidate for the Resource Party. Proud for the opportunity to represent a group that has been working tirelessly for over 30 years with looking for citizens' equality. I'd like to give you a little bit of background on myself. I'm new to the political scene. I grew up half in Massachusetts, half in the Midwest, St. Louis area. I graduated from the University of Massachusetts, where afterwards I embarked on a little bit of a crazy corporate career as a sales manager for Marriott Hotels. I bring to the table city experience and small town living experience. I lived in downtown Boston, downtown Chicago, downtown St. Louis, and when I moved to this great state 27 years ago, I lived in Loring Park, downtown Minneapolis. After several years in Minnesota, I met my husband, we married, we have 4 great kids. We decided to follow the American dream. We bagged the corporate life and we bought our own small fishing resort on Lake Mille Lacs in central Minnesota. I would have to say, after the first couple years there, all of a sudden, we were thrown in the midst of a turmoil. The Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, along with several groups of Wisconsin Indians, brought a fishing and hunting rights lawsuit against the state of Minnesota. I would have to say most of us in Minnesota or around the United States are going through life with our blinders on, making a decent living, raising our children, not paying a lot of attention to what's going on around us. All of a sudden, I'm in the midst of a political hotbed and turmoil. It seems I guess I want to back up a minute and just say when I moved to the area, I came there totally open-minded. I enrolled 2 of my children in the brand new school facility that the Mille Lacs Band had opened and just built. It was 1 year old. I toured it as I toured all the local schools to see where I was going to send my children. I enrolled my children in the preschool, 2 of them. I paid for 3 months. They lasted 3 days. I have housed, clothed, employed, lent money to, lent my vehicles to, gotten up in the middle of the night, and had meetings for tribal members. I'm just pointing this out because one of the very popular defenses in this fight is throwing the race card out. And nobody can tell me that I have not tried to be a good neighbor and have not fought for my Indian neighbors. The treaty lawsuit progressed, and the state ended up losing at the Supreme Court level. At that point, I guess I would I would say that the shock of the government that you've trusted to protect your rights now is saying the rules have changed and we are granting special rights based on race. All of a sudden, it's not a fishing issue anymore. It's an equal rights issue. And not only are my constitutional rights being stepped upon, along with every other citizen of the United States, but the individual Indian people's rights are being violated. It's not a democracy in Indian country. It is a dictatorship. It's tribal governments and federal governments driving a wedge between United States citizens living side by side. That is what has thrown me into this political arena. I worked pretty hard fighting in those early years. We've been on Mille Lacs for 16 years. It was a shock. I took my blinders off. All of a sudden you think grassroots and hard work. This is the United States. Your representative, your government officials have to care what you think and have to listen to the majority of the people. If you get petitions, you start a phone calling tree, you have letters sent, they have to listen. That's grassroots. This is the United States. Well, again, being kind of naive and going through life with my little blinders on, all of a sudden it hits you. Oh, whoops, it really doesn't matter what the people want. Our elected officials have become so disconnected to what the people want that it really ends up being the money and the power. The special interest groups are driving the decisions. I would love, as governor, to call every state representative into my office and just look them in the eye and say, so tell me who you're working for. Because I guarantee it's not the majority of their constituents. I think it's a rarity that we have a legislator out there that is working for his people in this day and age. The money and the power has become overwhelming. And if you don't play the game, you're out of the game. And it's not just, it has nothing to do with your constituents, it has to do with your political parties. Something that I learned I'd like to share, everybody checks a little box, not everybody, some people choose to check a little box on their income taxes. And that money goes to help political parties. So I received a phone call saying, oh, the deadline for the public money is up. You know, you need to get your application in. I said, well, geez, I didn't think I qualified. And they took them, oh, nope, you don't. Sorry, we didn't mean to call you. Next week, I get another phone call. Oh, just want to let you know, the deadline's coming up for that public money. Oh, I said, gosh, I didn't think I qualified. Well, oh, you really don't. By the third week, when they called me again, I said to the guy from the Capitol, I said, does anyone think it's kind of odd that it's only the big established parties that get that public money? And he said to me on the phone, well, who do you think makes the rules? It's a pretty broken system, and you can't change the results if you don't change the process. It's about time that we look at term limits, we look at breaking the cycle of the game and the entitlements and the special interest groups and start getting our government back as the people. Just a little bit about us. The Resource Party You can find more information on Go David Hoke and vote for Linda and Howard. Thanks. Bye-bye.
A few years ago, the citizens of Minnesota started hearing about a new baseball park. It was a decade ago, maybe longer. And I started reading about a couple guys that were out lobbying and taking a bus trip around the state, and they had a bill they called the Racino Bill, and they wanted to give the citizens of Minnesota a free baseball park with a retractable roof. And the bill that they were pushing at the legislature just got buried by the power of the gambling industry and the people that run it. And so it didn't go anywhere, and as a result, the citizens of Minnesota now have a ballpark that they're paying for, and it doesn't have a retractable roof, and that will come back to haunt us down the road. I finally, after that bill was defeated, I was fortunate enough to meet one of the two key people in that movement, and it was David Hoke. And we've become real strong friends over the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm just so thrilled and honored that he consented earlier this year to become our Attorney General candidate. I'm going to tell you why he's doing what he's doing and what he thinks about the way the government here in Minnesota has run the gambling issue. David Hoke. Give him a hand.
Well, thank you, Howard. You pretty well covered my involvement at the Capitol. You know what? I'm a pretty black and white guy. I'm going to distill this down into what my focus is as a candidate for Attorney General. I've made this claim, and I'm willing to offer you $10,000 if you can prove me wrong. Anybody out there, $10,000. And here's what I'm saying. When the state of Minnesota negotiated the current tribal state compacts for the regulation of Class III gaming in Minnesota, the state of Minnesota broke the law. The law they broke is Minnesota Statute 3.9221. That was very clear in laying out how the compacts were to be negotiated. The state of Minnesota violated the law when they negotiated the compacts, and then Governor Perpich, without the legislative authority to do so, executed or signed the compacts. Governor Perpich was to take the negotiations to the Minnesota legislature for their approval so that he could obtain legislative authority to execute the compacts. He never garnered that authority and instead signed them again in violation of the law. So the law was broken not once but twice. So all of the compacts in Minnesota must be declared null and void. This is why Lori Swanson will not debate me in any kind of an open forum. She knows I'm right. I've had my work reviewed by top attorneys around the country. They all know I'm right, and you better know there's a major lawsuit that's already been drawn up, and they're waiting to drop the hammer on the state of Minnesota with this lawsuit, and it's going to bankrupt the state because these attorneys know that I'm right. They've put together this lawsuit. They're putting together the people to have standing. And when this thing gets filed on the state of Minnesota has no defense, none at all. And where is Lori Swanson? Where is any other candidate for any other office addressing this issue? This is the biggest violation of law in Minnesota's history, and the media won't even cover it, even though they know, and reporters have told me I'm right. They have told me they have been censored, that they cannot cover me and what I'm saying because their editors will not allow it to be published. I'm hanging my hat on that. And look, if I'm right, vote for me. If I'm wrong, don't vote for me. In fact, I don't care if you don't vote for me at all. But look at what I'm saying. The state of Minnesota broke the law, Minnesota Statute 3.9221. So your state broke its own law, so why should anybody follow any laws? Okay? Game on, let's go, I'm ready. Thanks, Howard.
I saw some upstairs.
Boy, I'm glad he's our partner. And he's right. And they will not debate us. And there's no media here today. What does that tell you? Anyway, we've been very blessed the last 20 years working with the Citizens Equal Rights Alliance. It's the only national umbrella group that works with tribal members. We have a conference in Washington, D.C. every year. and I've had the great pleasure of meeting some great tribal friends, making some great tribal friends. And we've got two of them here today, and one of them is Leandra Gaines from Oklahoma, and I'd like to introduce her. She's got a great story to tell. And Leanne.
Thank you, Howard. I'd like to thank all of you for attending today. Howard, Linda, David, Todd, the Hunting and Angling Club, Perm, Sarah, the state of Minnesota to allow us to speak and unite our efforts for freedom and equality. Minnesota and Oklahoma are not that different. They are not gambling states. The voice of the people have not been heard. They have not voted to be a gambling state. Yet in the 1980s, Congress and tribal lobbyists pressured a misinformed President Ronald Reagan to sign the infamous Indian Gaming Act. Congress, misinformed presidents, and tribal councils are gambling away every citizen's rights and gambling with our children's future prosperity. Equality for every American citizen is the hope for a better standard of living, to improve your community by being involved, to stand up and speak out. Minnesota requires leaders that will ask the tough questions. And I think here today we have a governor and lieutenant governor and an attorney general that are willing to ask those tough questions. Listen to the voters, then choose the right course of action for all American citizens. We are united as American citizens. You are my people. We must be allowed to compete as equals to build up America's economic infrastructure. Freedom, equality, and the pursuit for happiness is the promise to be protected by the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights as equals for our immediate prosperity and for our future generations. These laws are only as good as the equality of the people that make our laws, the people that enforce our laws, and the people that obey our laws. These are the solutions that will continue to protect and defend our individual equality and national success. President Obama is thankful for President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. In 1861, during his first inaugural address, President Abraham Lincoln said, "I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so." President Lincoln knew that slavery could not be determined by a vote of the people or by Congress. He also knew that he was bound by the United States Constitution and the will of the American people to extend the laws of freedom and equality to every state and to maintain the Union. He continued, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies." At that time, President Lincoln had no intention of interfering with slave-owning states. The slaves would never rise up, sign a petition, and ask the president to free them. Today, tribal members will never rise up, sign a petition, and ask President Obama to free us and our children from the Secretary of the Department of the Interior's illegal trust responsibility, corrupt tribal governments, destructive federal Indian policies, and the incompetent ward status that has plagued our rights as citizens must finally come to an end. President Obama must issue the executive order to emancipate the 564 federally recognized tribes, their members and potential members from the trust responsibility. This emancipation order will first unite our country by ending our segregation to reinvest in our economy. Second, improve services for our military. And third, to allow us to compete as equals, regardless of color, and will increase employee qualifications. I began the Postcard for Freedom dated January 20th, 2009 for President Obama's inaugural date. I'm hoping that he will understand that these postcards represent at least 10 to 20 people every time one of these shows up at his door. I hope that you will take these postcards and mail them to your elected officials in your state and to President Obama. President Obama's executive order for emancipation must end the trust responsibility of the Department of the Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs over the individual landowners. This emancipation must release the allotted land and money that is being held in the trust accounts to make this transition for individual liberty. We have proven ourselves to be competent and confident to manage our affairs for at least the past 150 years. Today, this abuse of war power by Congress undermines and diminishes the sovereignty rights of city, county, state, and federal government. Excuse me. Every treaty, legislative act, and Supreme Court ruling continues the original terms of the 1830 imprisonment by renegotiating this hostage situation with the 564 tribal councils that use us and our children living on the reservation or not. I have been researching my family's history along with our nation's history, and I came across it's the IRS 1959 ruling. It quotes what declares an individual incompetent, and I have those on the table there. But in 1924, we were declared American citizens, except a man named James Solazzi was an adult at the time of his death in 1925. The only question that they were wondering was whether he was in fact an incompetent Indian. The acting Comptroller General's opinion of August 3rd, 1925 is pertinent. It may be stated as a general rule that the granting of citizenship to Indians does not alter the relationship of guardian and ward between such Indians and the federal government. In a case where property is held in trust for them or they are living on a reservation set aside for their use. If you're not familiar with the 1830 Indian Removal Act, it was an act of war declared by Congress. There's no part of Indian removal that makes me think, this land is set aside for your use. Indian removal means just that. They were going to remove the Indians any way possible. An incompetent Indian means, as understood by the department at that time in 1925, a person not declared incompetent by a court, but an Indian whose land is held by him subject to trust or restrictions under an act of Congress until a patent in fee or certificate of competency is issued by the Secretary of the Interior. That means that I am incompetent until proven competent by the Secretary of the Department of the Interior. An Indian, regardless of his mentality, is not competent with regard to his restricted or trust allotment. The problem today is that the 564 tribal councils are very bold. They understand that once land is held in trust, that they are no longer on the tax rolls. They do not have to pay taxes. They can establish businesses that are tax exempt. But at the same time, they insist on having police, fire, emergency, and not have to pay any taxes for those services, because the reservation areas are prisons. If you've ever been to a clinic on the reservation or Indian Health Services. The military is there. The military has all of their personnel to help the Indians because it is prison. Every time my ancestors fought relocation, escaped from the reservations, and every time the tribes bring a lawsuit against our government or the state, this is our petition to end the trust responsibility and allow us to manage our own land and money for ourselves. We must be equal. I hope that you will study and research the information I have given there at the table, and I hope that you will help us for freedom and equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne, and we are going to put her speech up on our website, and we will tell people to Facebook those cards around the country and just try to spread the word on the web and do whatever we can to further this request of hers for an emancipation proclamation by a president to free the Indian people from the trust. Our next speaker is Todd Fasthorse. I started communicating with him about 2.5, 3 years ago, and he's been to Washington, D.C. with the Citizen Equal Rights Alliance group the last 2 years. He's very brave. When you stand up to tribal governments, you have to be brave. You can lose your house, your job, you can be discriminated against. A year ago August, he was a poll watcher in the last election at Rosebud, the Rosebud Reservation. We also had a group of citizens from Montana there that was a Citizen Equal Rights Alliance board member, was a poll watcher in the election that changed the United States Senate. There was a vote in Montana that came in the last vote, and it was on a big restored reservation area where it's half fee land and half reservation land, similar to our White Earth Reservation up north, which now our government says is a reservation, but which still has people out there living that are discriminated against because they own fee land there. And so they are having their rights discriminated against as American citizens by this tribal sovereign to tribal sovereign, federal government to state agencies, and federal agencies working in the state of Minnesota that really causes a lot of social and a lot of social unrest, and it is racist. It's apartheid. You know, it's two sets of laws on one land. It doesn't work. But anyway, Todd had me start a letter writing campaign, and I used both citizen groups from Montana and from Rosebud, and I sent the letter to the Judiciary Committees, Attorney General of the United States Holder. I asked for the complete investigation of this fraudulent voting in Indian country. And up in the Montana election, a woman had called the election officials after the election, and she admitted to voting twice, once with a tribal card and once with a United States ID card. And she said that the tribal officials, the Crow leaders, had urged tribal members to vote in multiple locations using both their Indian card and their U.S. citizens identification card and vote multiple times. And so Attorney General Holder, the result of the thing was that he did hold some regional conferences with tribes to talk about corruption, and one of them was in Minneapolis, and Todd Fasthorse's sister attended that hearing. She had to protest to get in, but she did get in. So Martha's here today too, but she went to that hearing, and but it just shows how flawed the system is and how corrupt our federal government can be. So I'm very proud to introduce to you Todd Fasthorse, a very brave friend of mine. Give him a hand.
Thank you, Howard. I'm happy to be here in Minnesota at the Capitol today in support of the Resource Party. I believe that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party is not doing the right thing when it comes to Indian country. Howard, I have known for many years, and when tribal government violated my civil rights, Howard was one of the contact people that assisted me in trying to address my issues. I guess the question would be are there corrupt governments? I cannot speak for every tribal government, but for my government, the Rosebud Sioux Tribe, I can say with all honesty, absolutely. They're from voter fraud, as Howard was speaking of, to embezzlement, theft, commingling of federal funds. There's many issues that go unchecked, unresolved. So I have made the choice, and I've spoken with my family, and we believe that the best thing to do is start exposing the issues and educate the public about what's going on in Indian country, because I believe that any legislator that you speak with, whether state or Congress, they are not aware of what's going on in Indian country, or they simply do not care. That's the difference between the candidates for the Resource Party. I've been working with them for a few years, and I've traveled to D.C., and I've talked about some of the corrupt problems with my government. They are willing to get involved. They've assisted me in the letter writing campaign to Attorney General Holder, and it has made some impact in my homelands, but not a big enough impact where it will change the corruption that is going on. I believe equal rights and civil rights are important to all citizens of the United States, and we in Indian country just aren't afforded those liberties. So I think, again, I want to ask each of you to ask yourselves whether the two-party system is working or not, and ask for your support of these candidates. You know, they've got a lot going on. They are intelligent. They're hardworking. They have stood up for us Indian people, and I do say Indian. Other people say Native American if they're politically correct, but according to the Constitution, as we're defined as Indians. So one of the problems that we need to address is the ongoing corruption. When we go to law enforcement officials, they quietly say they will do their job, and we never hear from them again. We go to our congressional delegation, and they listen to our complaints as any congressional person would, but they fail to address the real issues in Indian country. The poverty and hopelessness are out of control. If you look at my tribe, again, the Rosebud Sioux Tribe, the suicide rate for children or for our teens is 10 times the national average. That is just unacceptable. And I believe that, again, the hopelessness caused by tribal corruption needs to end. Our children deserve good leadership. So, you know, I just want to ask you again to support these candidates in their bid. I think they are the right party because the system is not working, not for us on the reservation. I just think that, you know, without people like Howard and his party, that we will continue to suffer from an unjust government. The illusion that there is a tribal government complete with services for the people is simply untrue. There is no system that is working in Indian country. I think the statistics will tell the story. If a person took time to read the statistics for Indian country, that will tell the story of the problems we are facing as individual Indians. We have a federal agency called the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and I think the superintendent for the Rosebud Agency said it best. He told my mother, who filed a complaint, that he would accept the complaint. But the history for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, our BIA, is to accept that complaint, to put it on a shelf for a year, let it collect dust, and then refer it back to the tribe as an internal tribal matter. Now, if tribal government is the one committing the crime and violating an individual's civil rights, I actually don't see them doing anything to hold themselves accountable. They are not accountable to the states. They are not accountable to the federal government. So when an agency is protecting corrupt governments, I think that is also a problem that needs to be addressed before we can move forward. I believe the Resource Party is on Facebook. I encourage you to join me on Facebook. I encourage you to join me on change.org. I have two petitions that I started. One of the petitions is asking Congress to amend the Indian Civil Rights Act to comply with the recently signed into law Tribal Law and Order Act of 2009. Also, the second petition is to abolish the BIA. I think the problem is with the way corrupt governments are running, that they have to be rubber stamped by the BIA. And certainly on the Rosebud Indian Reservation, that is the case and that is the problem. So again, I want to thank you for allowing me to be here in Minnesota to ask each of you to support the Resource Party. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Howard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Todd. I've been trying to learn Facebook and how to post on Facebook while writing this campaign material and also writing a platform. We're moving along, but I still have a lot to learn about the Facebook, but I just love Todd's Facebook endeavor, and we're joining forces with him. I signed one of his petitions a couple days ago, and happy to do so, and we will get his talk up on our website, our Facebook site, and we will start promoting his Facebook and his petitions, and also Leanne's. And on my Resource Sentinel website, I've got some footage, a YouTube presentation by Scott Kayla Morrison that was taken several years ago. And she broke down the dollars that go through the system to the Indian community. And what Todd is talking about, if you go and listen to that presentation by her, only 11 cents of the dollar that goes in the top to a tribal business council comes out the bottom to the membership. And that's pretty frightening, that you have all this huge budget of federal dollars and a lot of state dollars now going into the tribes, but very little gets out the bottom of the spigot to the people that need it the most. It seems like the system needs and breeds itself on poor Indian. And the reality is that now with the gambling and stuff, I mean, they have so much more money than any other citizen group that surrounds them. It's unbelievable. I'd like you to read a portion of a letter that I sent to President Obama earlier this year. And it's talking about how much money the tribe gets. In June of 2005, a Mille Lacs Band newsletter reported the band had a budget of $141,583,850 for 3,665 people. That equates to $38,631 per member, or $154,525 for a family of four. Most of this is federal and state taxpayer money. The newsletter states that these figures do not include all the profit from the band's 2 large casinos. I have a good friend up there, Mushkoob, who this last year went to Washington with me, and he told me that every member's take from the casino was $800 a month. Well, you add that on to that $38,000 per member, and now suddenly you're up to $47,000 per member. And you're starting to scratch your head and wonder what's going on here. But if you talk to the people themselves, they don't see that money. The Tribal Business Council takes it, and then it's a spigot that comes out the bottom. I don't know how much they actually get. But they're very wealthy from gambling. They're buying land, taking it off the tax rolls. I next want to give you some budget deficit news about like Cass County, which is, first of all, the Mille Lacs Band gets commercial fishing, which has run 40 businesses out of business around the shores of Lake Mille Lacs the last few years. And then they have these 2 casinos, and they're buying land, taking it off the tax rolls. And so they have the commercial fishing business, and they have the gambling business, and it was supposed to enhance the standard of living for the tribal members. But what did it do to the surrounding community? And then in their last budget, they submitted a $3 million budget for lobbying, public relations, and legal costs. So here you have all this money in the hands of tribal government, and it's just causing all this pain and unhappiness with the surrounding communities. And that's true all over northern Minnesota. And in Cass County, the tribal members are 10% of the county population. They consume 80% of the social costs of the county and 65% of the enforcement cost. The counties are going broke. The resorts are being run out of business by the attraction to the gambling, plus on Lake Mille Lacs, the commercialization of the fish. That's a bad, bad situation, and one that you can't fix our budget deficits unless you deal with it. The gambling, every fact that we've had studying with Professor John Kent, the leading authority on gambling in the United States, he's a professor at the University of Illinois. He's been to our last 5 or 6 Citizen Equal Rights Alliance conferences in Washington, D.C. Every dollar the tribe takes in costs the citizens in social costs $3 per dollar they take in. That's because crime escalates 10% every year after the 3rd year as people get addicted. Now, I've been writing about the Las Vegas casino crowd that has opened all these tribal gaming casinos, and that's kind of run by organized crime. And we've been writing about that for years. We have 4-page fact sheets on our website. You can go to Resource Party. The first one I wrote back in like 2005 or 6. John McCain, in his campaign finance reform bill, purposely left tribal loopholes in there so that they could start electing people to Congress and controlling our nation's capital. And you've all read about Abramoff, and he went to jail, but the industry is still there. And lo and behold, John McCain ran his investigation. I don't know what happened to the Justice Department, but all of a sudden, the guy that created it ran the investigation, and Abramoff went to jail for a few years. But the industry is still there, controlling our state capital, controlling our national capital, controlling many state capitals. And with them, of course, you get the drugs, and you get the booze, and you get the sex business, you know. And they own the strip clubs, the chains of strip clubs. And they're very powerful, and they, for some reason, the media just loves them and doesn't write about it. But we've been trying to, and explaining the budget deficits that they leave behind. I don't know how much there is in budget deficits in Minnesota caused by gambling, but it's got to be enormous. We have this huge $6 billion budget deficit. I would bet that gambling, the University of Minnesota did a study, they said $10 billion. We think it's more than that. Then we have alcohol. Recently, two law professors from the University of Minnesota did a study on the cost of alcoholic DWI driving, and including the law enforcement, the incarceration, the hospitalization of the accidents, all the costs associated, and it was $4.5 billion a year. The tax on alcohol by the state was $328,000 or $238,000, which means we got $4.2 billion in budget deficits from the alcohol. But then there's a new thing that we're learning about since a year ago last March when we met Jody Allen Crow, who wrote the book, The Fatal Link. We'd been reading about fetal alcohol syndrome because we read Bill Lawrence's Ojibwe News newspaper up at Red Lake, and he started writing about it, and he was a friend of Jody Allen Crow's. And Jody Allen Crow was a school teacher that started his education teaching on Lake Mille Lacs, then got transferred, or then he just moved up the ladder and wound up as a superintendent of schools out in Idaho. Bill Lawrence kept insisting that his friend Jody keep studying this fetal alcohol syndrome story, and he did. And he did his own study on school shooters. He saw how these kids were prone to violence and easily manipulated, and the drug gangs on the reservation used them as enforcers. And the day I met him, he had just met the mother of the school shooter at Red Lake. Anyway, his study showed, as much as he could ascertain from the people he talked to, that 80% of the school shooters, their mothers drank during pregnancy. And the kids had fetal alcohol syndrome. So for since March a year ago, we've been studying and learning as much as we can. Well, last Christmas, we found a study, Jody Allen Crow found it, sent it to me, in Great Britain, where they did it was only on like maybe 10 or 12 fetal alcohol kids, or autistic kids, I'm sorry, autism kids, babies. And their mothers were alcoholics or drank during pregnancy. And so that was the beginning of that study, and Jody has all kinds of studies on his Healthy Brains for Children website that shows bipolar disorders. A lot of these orders, not all of them, but a lot of them are caused by fetal alcohol syndrome. And so I just heard yesterday on the radio, I was driving around, and there's somebody talking on the CNBC Business Channel about the 600% increase in autism babies in the last 20 years. Think of that, 600% increase. And then you start reading about the binge drinking in the colleges, and you read about the people dying, and just young people, because they've been binge drinking, and they consume enough alcohol to die on the way home. I mean, we have an epidemic, and then of course boys want to get girls inebriated to make love, which is natural and all this stuff, but we have a lot of uneducated people about the effects of gambling. Leanne just told me that she was watching this morning show the other day, and here's an actress saying, she's pregnant and she has a glass of wine every day. Well, you can't do that if you're pregnant, from what we've learned. So now, how much of the education costs in our school systems are attributed to fetal alcohol syndrome? We asked some people at the Capitol a few months ago, could you give us those statistics? What's the cost of special education? And relating to that, I haven't heard yet, and so because we're a third party, we can be ignored, but at some point, we're going to get those numbers, and if it's $4.5 billion on drunken driving, how much is it on brain harming kids' brains from fetal alcohol syndrome? And so these are enormous budget deficit costs. They're $1 million babies, $1 million social cost to the citizens, to the taxpayers. So if the Resource Party gets 5% of the vote this year, and in the next 2 years we'll get better structured, and we will start bringing these issues to the table that you never read about in the paper. You know, it's like the outdoor community, they blame the fishing sinkers, lead in sinkers. That's not what causes fetal alcohol syndrome, nor is it the paint on the toys. I'm not saying a kid can eat paint, but I'm telling you that there's a diversion away from the topic that should be discussed in our media. And again, I say it's like the old tobacco industry. It was just something else that caused lung cancer, you know. But these are issues that the Resource Party will bring to the table, and they're important issues. And, you know, here's another thing that I didn't get in. When the former Attorney General Gonzalez was firing the federal attorneys, he fired 7 or 8 of them. He was firing them because they were trying to stop crime on reservations. Our reservations since Clinton, well, first Nixon started it, self-determination. Then it went to, Clinton really strengthened it. And the self-determination, the life on the reservation got worse and worse and worse because you get into the gambling business, you get into the drug business, you get into all this other stuff that's just bred by the organized crime, and suddenly we have safe havens all over the place. And they had big drug busts at Red Lake, Mille Lacs this year. Mille Lacs has a huge, huge drug problem. I mean, it's immense. It never gets play in the Minneapolis or St. Paul media. It gets written about in the Mille Lacs Messenger, but this stuff has got to get out, and the Resource Party will talk about it. We will bring it to the table. Please help us help you by getting us, telling all your friends, get on our Facebook, get on our website, pass it along to your email friends. Tell the folks out there that the Resource Party will talk about these issues and help you fix our once great republic and restore it to what it's supposed to be. We'll get that compass back going to the rule of law, the Constitution of the United States, equal protection of the law for all citizens, including our Indian friends. Thanks for coming, and thank you very much.